Hi there. Welcome to Activating Magic. I am here with our fabulous guest today, Amber Swenor. Hi, Amber.
Hello.
And I assume you're joining from Wisconsin, right? Because it's summer and beautiful.
Yes, it is. I'm happy to be here in summer.
Yes, I love it. Awesome, because Amber's all over the place all the time. And we have the pleasure, my guest, Amber, is a literal rock star. So I know we're going to talk about that. She's been helping purpose-driven leaders to unleash authentic success for 20 plus years as a business strategy consultant, transformational leadership coach, speaker and author, communications trainer, and she is the front person for a melodic metal band. And Amber, I got the pleasure of hearing you speak. I think it was when we first met in person. You took the stage at a talent show at an event. I have had the pleasure of working with you in the Source Leader program and watching you just get on stages, speak your truth, and you're such an inspiration the way that you bring just this deep authenticity into the world. Like I know your clients would say about you that you just kind of level the space, if
Mm,
that makes sense,
mm,
and really,
you.
really see people deeply. I've watched you interact and support other leaders in my community, and I just so appreciate who you are in the world. I love you dearly. Thank you for saying yes to this.
Mm.
And tell people a little bit about how your magic helps people be more authentic. Let's
Mm.
start there.
Well, first, I want to thank you for seeing me deeply because it's helped me step into my magic. And I think so. Thank you because you were able to recognize in me a lot of my gifts, but I've been able to bring them out more confidently because of how you saw me. And in a lot of ways, that's what I bring to other people. And I think that's a
Mhm.
beautiful thing that a lot of us who know we're meant to support other humans in their journey, that is a lot of the gift that we bring to each other. And so my magic helps people in that way around helping people really connect with who did they truly at a soul level come here to be. And then what I call unleashing that. And unleashing it is when we are moving through the world, being, doing, creating in alignment with what brings us the most joy, what we feel that we are called here to do, creating success on our terms. So I say I work at the intersection of soul and strategy and named my business as such for that reason, Soul Seed Strategy. And that's my gift and magic, that power to help people really align with who they are, but then also how to actually bring it all the way to life, which is really fun with my recognition and expansion magic.
Mm, I love it. I'm going to ask you about what soul means to you in a second. And I want to let people in on the conversation we had just prior to this about the listeners of this podcast and my wish for anyone listening who's magical. They see people, they feel truth, they make connections maybe beyond what's being presented. And there's like a knowing, a wisdom. And if you're
Mhm.
that person and you're alone in the world, my goal is that you feel connected, that you know you're not alone. So when you speak to the idea of soul,
Mhm.
and we're talking about magic and soul, I feel they go together. How do you help someone really bring their soul into their strategy?
Thank you. That's so good because we all get to determine what things mean to us. So for me, I see it as who we are when we experience the freedom of actually being and doing the things that make us feel alive. And it's who we are, even with the awareness of defaults or traumas or fears, but choosing to still honor and step into and live into that part of us where we really feel like we're meant to make a purpose or a contribution here on this planet. I think a lot of us have, like, we feel sparks of that, or we experience sparks of it, but then it's really often like the outside noise that makes us shrink back. So it's that place that that's what soul is for me. It's that expression of freedom when
Mhm.
you're living into that and helping people because it feels true for you, regardless of outside noise or pressure or judgments or fears.
Oh my gosh, I love that definition so much. The freedom and the aliveness of
Mhm.
following what feels true.
Yeah.
And I love the outside noise. I'm sure people get what that means. And I'm wondering, Amber, I know you have lots of amazing stories of trusting yourself. What's been an example for you of when you were in soul, even if there was a bunch of outside noise?
Oh, okay. So many. So one of them that I think that we've chatted a little bit, I think you enjoy this story, but so one of them, I look back some years when I was going through the process of writing my book, I was really mining for like to understand where were the times in my journey where I kind of knew I was being my true self, but then I kind of went back in my shell. And one of them was in my early 20s. And from the time I was a kid, I had this dream to be Miss America. I wanted to win the scholarship money. I admired the confidence of the contestants. So in my early 20s, I started competing in pageants. And I did well with the interview and speaking, but I had a problem that the talent was the biggest part of the score, and other contestants had all this professional training and years of classical singing. And what I had was growing up singing along to classic rock music on the radio. So when I started competing in the pageants, I listened to different mentors and like tried to do the songs that they told me to do that were pageant appropriate, and all the while like was trying harder and harder.
Pageant appropriate.
Yeah, exactly, pageant appropriate.
What does that mean?
It was all the wrong fit for my voice. It was beautiful music that was not rock and roll. Okay.
Uh,
So finally the last pageant ever. And leading up to that, I felt like I was trying harder and harder to win and be what they wanted me to be and was not winning. And so for that last pageant, I really like checked in with myself on what would make me feel good and alive and kind of like go out there and leave it all out there because what was there to lose, right? I hadn't been winning anyway. And so one of my favorite artists was Pat Benatar, rock and roll, classic rock from the 80s. And I sang one of those songs at the pageant. And I was super proud, but I also kind of like ran off the stage when it was done. But it was years later that I was able to look back and see, you know, when it was to that point where I was starting my business and I had all these fears, or different times when I started putting myself out there making videos online, I was able to look back and say, Amber, the you of 15 years ago had the guts to do that. Like you can do it again now. It's almost like we earlier in life, we know who we are, and then we get all this stuff piled on top, and then you take like 20 years to clear it all, and then like step back into who you actually are. And that's one of those journeys.
so true. Okay, super proud and then ran off the stage.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that. I remember feeling like a badass, but also scurrying off, which has also been a theme at times.
Yeah, well, because in your book, Unleashed, which we'll talk
Yeah.
about, you kind of talk about like the vibe in the room and how, like, can you paint a picture of how different it was for Pat Benatar to come up? It was Heartbreaker, right?
Yeah, good memory. Yes. Your love is like a tidal wave. That song.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay, paint a picture for the room. Well, you step out on stage, you've got about 2.5 minutes, and most people are, especially 20 years ago, it was the pretty typical pageant hair, pageant gowns. You were doing more classical style music. And then I come out with this soundtrack of this like heavy rock beat, and I could already see the looks on the faces. It was like pageant moms and pageant directors. So I did the performance. I feel like I just remember them at the end of it, kind of like sitting back, like what just happened. But also, after it was done, there were a few like early teenage girls that came up to me with just like this light in their eyes and told me how awesome it was. And it was like, it wasn't really about the quality of the performance. It was again that way you talk about magical beings, seeing magical beings. And it was one of those moments where like they saw me and I saw them, that they were like, you did something that was true to you and we see that. And it's been those moments in my life that have been the thing that fuels me to keep going.
Amber, I feel like that's such a gift you've brought to the world too. Like I've seen your book in the hands of groups of teenagers, and I know those are the moments that light you up so much.
Thank
It's just
you.
so beautiful.
I remember so I was working with you when I was in the process of really moving middle to completion of my book. And I'm sure I was overwhelmed about something, overthinking something. And you helped me pause and said, Amber, if you imagine that your book is in a bookstore and there's someone across the room, that book is exactly for them. How do you want them to feel when they're drawn to it? How do you want them to feel when they open the pages? And so I just loved that. Being able to think of it that way helped me move past the overthinking of what are people going to think? Who is this for? Because I was able to immediately think of, well, who was I when I was 12, 15, even younger, thinking something was wrong with me or I'm different or like my sensitivity is a weakness. And so that's been really fun that I just created it from that really like intentional place. And then I was kind of blown away that it actually worked. Like in the world, people actually like, and it's such a gift that I hear from people and say, I feel like you were speaking directly to me. And then they tell me the action they took, the thing they moved forward because they were inspired from the book. Yeah, it's been really
It's
cool.
a great book. I have read it. It's beautifully written and so inspiring, so many stories. You said, and I know people get so much. I mean, I see people share on social media after having read it. And so I'm just so happy for you and for them. And I'm thinking of young Amber. You shared the one story, but you just said, worrying my sensitivity is a weakness.
Mm.
And so common, right? Like I remember there was a point I learned my name, Darla LeDoux, means the soft one, the sweet one. And I was like, that's some bullshit, right? Like, what good is that in this world? Um, and learning to embrace that has been a journey. And so when you say my sensitivity maybe was viewed as a weakness by someone, how have you learned to embrace that?
Oh, well, that was the entire transformation of my 30s.
Or like, what did it look like
Mm.
when you were not embracing that? Like maybe what
Okay.
jobs
Great
did you
question.
end up in, or
Yes.
what decisions did you make when you weren't embracing that?
Yes. So there's nothing wrong with crying. I still do it often. It's a good release. But what it looked like was crying every day and being in sheer frustration around feeling misunderstood. So I was a combination of extremely hardworking, high achiever, but also strong intuition and sensitive. But I made no room for, and I didn't know how to make room for it, had no one in my life I felt that really understood how to make room for sensitivities. So a lot of times it looked like people thinking they were supporting me saying, stop being so sensitive. Why do you care what people think? Stop crying, toughen up, thinking they were being
Mhm.
supportive. But really what that was doing was leaving no space for me to learn how to express myself. Because actually part of my design is I do so much better to process my emotions, whether it's out loud with myself, with a friend, with a coach, but I
Yeah.
need to be able to ride that emotional wave and be witnessed in it and
Yes.
say, hey, it's cool. Like you're just riding the wave. And then
Yes.
I get clear by letting that emotion pass. But
Mhm.
by stuffing it down, I was actually causing myself a ton of anxiety and overwhelm. And so now what that looks like today is learning and honoring how I move through decisions, how I process emotions. And it's made me a much better coach, friend, person, leader, businesswoman, like better in all the ways of life. And I'm so much happier.
So you're an emotional authority in
Yes,
human
I'm a
design, right?
projector, emotional authority.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, I'm curious if this is true for you. When I started getting into the world of coaching, and I went to coaching school, but I didn't really know how to run a business, right? And
Mm,
so then I ended up in events and rooms and webinars and summits and all the things teaching you how to do it right. I didn't know how, I didn't, yeah, it's like I was an unconscious competent at my intuition.
mm.
Like there were times where I just knew, like,
That's
I
such
know
a
I
good
need to say
phrase.
yes to this thing because I just know and I feel uneasy about it, but I know I need to say yes. But then there are other times where I didn't know my decision process, or I didn't know how to say no, or to really own what felt true for me.
Hmm.
And so, and I have the gut authority, you have the emotional, so yours takes even a little longer.
Ooh.
Did you have any experiences like that as you're growing your business of not knowing that you needed the space to feel all the feelings?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So, so early in my business, there was someone who was like a mentor and it turned out to come into my as a business partner, join up with me in my business. It was very short-lived. It was a mismatch. Ultimately didn't work out, but I was able to look back on it and see the reason for it was that I was overriding my intuition because I didn't understand how to trust it. And I
Mm.
was telling myself, Amber, you need to be logical, think with your brain. Everybody else who grows successful businesses, especially early on, my model was to be more of a marketing agency. And I looked around, and all the other agencies had 2, 3, and 4 co founders. And so I was telling myself, well, you must have an ego, Amber, that you thought you could actually build your own business.
Mm.
I was thinking of myself as being this like big-headed bitch that I thought I was too
Mm.
smart, that I was going to lead on my own. So I told myself, you're supposed to have co-founders to actually prove that you're good at working with other people. So I was making the decision on all these misalignments,
Wow.
whereas my intuition all along just felt like trust yourself, and this isn't the right match anyway. Like there were clearly things about that dynamic that were not a good match. So,
I love this story so much because you can get the whole world of outside noise.
yes.
Like other agencies do it this way. And then I hear what we call default of, oh, do you think you're so smart that you don't need a partner?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and that fear of being like egoic in some way, as opposed to just like, no, I just know.
Yes. Well, and it made sense once I started doing a lot of deconstructing of my belief sets. A lot of it made sense because I hadn't really been shown examples of that it's okay to be a powerful, successful woman, and that you can lead solo, but you can still build a team. It doesn't mean that they all need to be the owners with you, right? Like learning more about these weird power dynamics in my head. But if I were to simplify this, because there's like a lot of pieces to it, but at the simplest way, that's why I think the kind of work we do is so powerful, is if we can learn how to listen to our body and our own intuition. That's the kind of tool I have now that helps me so much more quickly discern what's for me and not for me. Because, and so for me, I don't ever necessarily feel always 100%, but I feel like 80%. That's how I've learned to work with my emotional decision making. It's like I kind of know, and I just I know, so I know, and I can't overthink it too much because I know. Like some people have the gut yes, which I don't really get that. But if I would have just known how to listen to that, the fact that that feeling kept being there, like this isn't right.
Yeah.
Now, today, I know how to trust that. And I don't, for the most part, I don't really second guess it. So back then it was present, but I didn't know that I could listen to that.
Right. Right. Well, you said you didn't have models of being a powerful, successful woman solo.
Right. Or models for listening to intuition.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the purpose of this podcast and this conversation.
Yeah.
Like what changes in the world when we lead with our inner truth rather than the outside noise.
Yeah.
It really, I believe that we have the exact right humans on this planet to be able to handle all the things we need to if we are all just walking our unique path. I feel like I got to ask about this, like, who am I to kind of do my own business, like just me
Yeah.
leading it? I wonder, do you see that with your clients at all? Whether it's that exact thing or some version of, like, who do you think you are to be visible? Who do you think you are to have an opinion? Who do you think you are to earn a bunch of money? Do you see that in your work?
Hugely, yes. Yes. And even people who outwardly can seem very confident, and I was this way. It was this weird thing where I simultaneously believed in myself, and some days like I was all in, but then half the days or moments
Mhm.
there was still that story running. And
Yeah.
I see that it's so common. There's a few different things that come up. It's definitely the who am I? I don't want to seem like I'm full of myself or it's all about me, because especially mission driven, heart centered people, especially women or magical beings, because we care about doing good for the world. And
Mhm.
so I work with those people to really focus on the outcomes of the work, but them embracing that if not them, then who? Like if
Yeah.
they feel called to it and it's for them, then it's for them. And it's really just oftentimes when we get to the root of it, it's someone else's story that has us thinking that we're running on ego when really we're just trusting our magic and our gifts and our soul when we be this expression. If we're the one to lead the work, then we're the one to lead the work.
Right.
And the other thing I see is sometimes earlier in the journey, people think, well, right away that they should hire a salesperson or a marketing or this or that and hand things over as if thinking that someone else is smarter and will magically handle it,
Yes. Right.
which there is a time and place for building team and outsourcing. And when it serves us better when I feel I've seen this, I've lived it myself, seen it with clients. If you're doing it from the perspective of just handing it over and expecting someone else to build something for you, that's not going to work. Versus when we can really strengthen and trust ourselves and trust our vision and stand in a place of power to now work with a collaborator or give them tasks or assignments.
Right.
But there's some of that people kind of stumble over.
Yeah. Well, that makes me really want to ask, in the time that we worked together, you had the successful marketing agency. You were, I'm going to say you mentioned your recognition and expansion magic
Yeah.
earlier, which is, within the framework that I teach. Um, you were starting to recognize patterns in your clients and be
Mm-hmm.
called to use your gifts in a different way. And I think this is common when people have marketing agencies and people come and they say, okay, here you go, do me, right? Like fix my marketing. And
Oh,
but they're not aligned inside. So what was your experience like when you started to get the nudge to shift how your offerings in your business? So
yeah.
like taking that on for someone that wasn't ready.
To be honest, I knew it before I started. The time I started my business, I felt I am meant to work with people in their journey, but I didn't necessarily have the language or know what the model was or how to get paid for it. So I had proven that I was extremely good at marketing and brand strategy, looking at a business, understanding what their positioning should be and how they can make money. I was selling advertising, but it was really that piece I was really good at. I could look at a thing and I could see how to make money and where the actual problem was. Sometimes it was like the staff or the sales journey. So I started saying, okay, we're going to do marketing, but really I know I meant to work with people. And so I just started experimenting from the beginning where the kind of questions I would ask
Hmm.
from the front end, which required me trusting myself and having the confidence to do it, knowing that some people may not be in for that journey. They might just be like, I just want to be on the first page of Google, or I just want my social media to work. So the more I could guide them and let them know, ultimately, we know if we can focus on what are your goal outcomes, this requires some trust to trust me on how I'm going to help you get there, but I've got to diagnose this correctly before I'm going to sell you anything. And
Mm.
it's helped us have tremendous success. And why we grew so quickly was that I never looked at it as selling marketing. I looked at it as solving problems. And it doesn't mean it was smooth, right? Because there were times where I would start like if going into that space of coaching and supporting their transformation when they'd be like, but I came from marketing. So I learned how to start shifting what I was talking about, how exactly I was selling it. So, and then what happened was I started having two arms to my business where one was a bit more the traditional marketing, even though we still asked the different questions that a lot of marketing agencies wouldn't do. And then another arm was coaching and strategy. And eventually I just rebranded and we let go of the marketing pretty much altogether. Like if clients are private coaching and consulting with me, I will take them through that whole brand strategy journey, but it always starts with what's the work they're here to do? Where do they need support getting their team aligned as humans? Because we need that to work in order for any strategy to work.
I love
That was a
that.
long answer. Sorry.
No, that was a beautiful answer. First of all, I just want to acknowledge that, like, even early on, you were telling them, okay, look, this process requires some trust because we're going to do this. And, so many
Yeah.
people don't know to say that. Their magic is firing and going, what this person is saying and how they're being don't match.
Yeah.
But they don't know what to do with that, right? And
Yeah.
so as leaders in transformation, we have to be able to teach people
Yeah.
before we, just dive in to teach them like, okay, trust the process. We're going to go on a little journey. I promise we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that you did that. And the other thing you said that really stood out is you said, I knew it before I started. And
Mm-hmm.
then but you said, you didn't really have a model for it. So you're kind of looking at what other people are doing. And I'm wondering if you could expand on, I knew what? I knew what before I started. What's it?
Okay. So if I look back to where I was then, in my heart, I felt that's going to maybe sound simple, but I felt I am meant to help people follow their dreams and actually be who they're meant to be,
Yeah. Mhm.
which is beautiful and funny and all the things because I still hadn't walked that journey, but I had a higher self that has known it all along.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's standing out to me, Amber, in this conversation. And even like before we started recording, is like this knowing. Yeah, and that sounds simple because this whole podcast is about knowing, but it's like it feels like you have a whole knowing that's very expansive that comes in. And then it's like navigating the reality of the circumstance and how to get to the knowing
Yes.
that you already knew.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that I've had this whole knowing that I, since very young, but a lot of the work I needed to do was more deconditioning around the traumas that were inflicted through the world and our growing up and like the stories we hear. Then through doing that and like finding nurturing spaces that actually encourage the knowing,
Mm.
it just opened up and shifted so much for me. And I see that with so many others as well.
I love that phrase.
Yeah, it's
Nurturing spaces that encourage the knowing.
mm-hmm.
And I mean, that truly is what this podcast is intended to be, is that space. And I needed that space, right? Like, my story of when I had the big event and I had Liz Gilbert come speak and I did all, and it was like totally someone else said, you have to host big events. And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't divinely inspired. And it ended up being so challenging to follow through on that it sent me into really learning how to know.
Yeah.
And, I've shared this before. I paid a coach a ton of money to sit on the phone with me and say nothing.
Mm.
So I could just have space to hear my knowing. And I
Yeah.
didn't know how to hear it. Like I didn't know. So it was just like waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And it was almost like the waiting had
Yes.
to clear out all the space.
Yes. And that's a beautiful and all the things. It's so I meet a lot of people who say like, well, I have no connection to that knowing, or that doesn't exist for me. And so first, I don't want to make no one's wrong in wherever they feel they're at. And it's this interesting thing, like, it took me peeling back layers, and it took like, I don't even know if you remember, back when we started working together, or just sometimes the amount of so up here-ness that I would have in my days and my weeks. Now I'm a few years past how I used to operate every day like that I look back and I'm like, wow. Now if I start to feel myself rising, I notice it immediately. And to think that 5 years ago I lived 24/7 in this, like, what felt like a heightened nervous system state, even though I was intuitive and I was still doing powerful work. So I think I just want to say, no matter where someone is,
Yes.
it's beautiful, and you can take a step. And if it feels like you're hearing a conversation like this and you're like, what in the heck? Like, I don't even, how would I ever be there? It might be possible that if you want to be there, you can get to that level of self-trust, to where, I mean, I've made all kinds of big decisions, and we probably won't get into all of them, but I've made a lot of changes in life and a lot of big decisions that were strictly because of following what I feel is my knowing. And on the outside, a lot of people would probably think it's nuts, a lot of the choices.
I just want to speak to the being up here and how our world promotes this, right? Like, even if you say, oh, I'm going to do this, the first question someone says is why? And then
Mm,
we have to explain it. And so, I remember as you were making different decisions, there was a lot of rational reasons for all the different directions.
hmm.
And isn't that so true, right? There's like a rational reason to stay home. There's a rational reason to go out there. And it's like, it's
They
not
could
about,
all lead to a great path, but ultimately we have to just ask ourselves, like, what do we feel that we're meant to do and that we want?
so I know you said in this conversation, you said, I always, since I was a kid, wanted to be Miss America.
Mm,
Earlier you mentioned I always wanted to go to Africa and I didn't even know where it was. Um, I've seen you create like your house in Florida. That was a
hmm.
vision for you. You wrote the book before you knew why you were writing a book. And when you thought, well, this seems like a waste of time to write a book, but I got the knowing that I need to write a book. And now it's like such a foundation of your work. And I know you mentioned a movie project coming next. So, or not even next, that you're in. Yeah, I just want to reflect that, like, deep, deep knowing that not everybody has. And I'm just curious, what's been painful about just knowing things? Like if you started telling people you wanted to use
Oh,
America or go to Africa when you're a child, like
oof,
painful about that.
oof. Well, more in my childhood or earlier years, it can be painful if you're surrounded by people who don't know how to support that, or they're coming with love, but their own fears, limiting beliefs. Growing up in a family that is very hardworking and a lot of undereducated, under income, nobody ever left our small town. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that in and of itself was met with so much not understanding, fear, and even this feeling like, well, if I do different things in the world, am I putting myself in this different class of life that now I don't fit the family because I didn't stay here and do the same thing as everyone else. So
Hmm.
there's those
I'm sure
layers.
people are relating to that.
Yeah, yes, yes.
What's
Yeah,
been the journey with that? Because you obviously did it anyway.
yeah, yeah. And it still comes up. So, the journey with it is learning how to honor like the relationships that I still want to have, but learning, I don't know if we want to say boundaries or like limits on what does that look like in terms of where do I sleep? How many days do I stay? What phone calls do I pick up? If we're willing to have this time with loved ones or friends or family, are we agreeing to not talk about XYZ topics? Are we, it's looked like having to really kind of define for myself, how can I have this relationship and connection in a way that's not detrimental to my soul and my being? and know that I don't have to agree with all the things of the ones people around me, but can I find the joy and the connection and and both parties have to want that. And I'm grateful that a lot of people in my life that we have different lives, but that they've come with the desire. But there's definitely, we get tested,
Mhm.
you
Yeah, I
know?
relate to the things you're saying, like, okay, I'm gonna come home, but I'm gonna stay in a hotel. And then all of the backlash of that. And it
Ah,
becomes a norm, right?
well, I mean, in
Or
that,
people adjust. Like we think
yeah,
the world will end and people adjust to our
yes.
needs
Or
and
if
our
someone just
desires.
says this is what is best for me, we just have to stand in that. And
Yeah,
if someone were to have a comment about it, like that's fine. Let that be their comment.
yeah. Okay, so
The
let's
alternative
talk.
is like letting go of the relationship, maybe. And some people do have to choose
Yeah,
that, right? Yeah.
yeah. I've definitely done that and or limited contact. I say for me, I limited contact with certain people while I built my muscle of being able to
Yeah.
trust myself and
Yes.
have good boundaries and take care of myself, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then it still can get tested sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You've gotten this draw to create a movie.
Yeah.
Do you want to share anything about that?
Sure. I'm in the midst. It'll be fun to look back
Huh?
someday and hopefully it comes to fruition and say, hey, I talked about that with Darla.
Yes.
So coming into the turn of this year, it started as this bit of a whisper, an idea, this thought of make a movie. I think I want to, there's parts I feel like are still for me that I don't want to share yet, but I do feel that it is meant to help people in their journey of being who they're here to be. I really feel I'll be a lot based on my lived experiences, but I see it being a movie or a Netflix series. So I went to an event earlier this year with a bunch of entrepreneurs. Didn't know exactly why I was there, but I decided to be brave and say, well, let me just ask for help making this movie, even though I don't know if anyone here even has a connection to that. The first night at the event, I had this awesome connection with this fabulous woman. Didn't know what she did, but we were just vibing on each other's energy. It was a lot of it,
Yes.
loving on each other. Later that night, someone's like, well, what's a goal you have of being here? I said, well, I can't explain it, but I think I'm meant to make a movie. And they said, did you know so and so is this badass, amazing film director? And it was the woman I had just had this amazing connection with. So the next day in the room, when we each had time to share about our businesses, I used my time to simply say, I think I came to this event to meet that woman. And I said her name. And I'm like, because I think I'm meant to make a film and maybe we're meant to do it together. She's so amazing. She's been taking a look at my screenplay. And regardless of where that goes, it set me on a path of having the confidence to write the screenplay, even though I had no idea how to write a screenplay. Having this
Mhm.
amazing woman who's done feature films and big work validate to me, you have a story worth telling, like keep going. So it's
Mm.
just so cool because I know that the me of a few years ago would have thought myself out of it and said, how does this connect to your business? Where's the strategy? But I
Right.
totally trusted intuition on that.
Oh, this could be a whole can of worms. Where's the strategy in that? I love that. Okay. But first, the when you got the nudge at the beginning of the year, did it come in fully formed, like, oh, this is what the movie's about, or was it like a little bread?
No, but it did come with some themes, which
Okay.
is similar to how my book and a lot of things are for me, where I notice myself continuing to doodle or write the similar phrases and the similar type of theme.
Mhm.
And I've learned to just trust it and go. I teach a lot on how do we work with progress over perfection? How do we learn by doing? Yes, there are certain things that need a plan, but I think when especially we're in the creation process and still really figuring out like what's the shape in life this is meant to have, we just have to like do it. And
Yeah.
that's where it's been really beneficial to challenge myself to write a like time block every few days. And I just sit down and do it. And it's just helping me stay and actually like getting the story out instead of thinking about writing the story. I just sit down and I'm writing the story. And by
Um,
doing that, it's actually getting clearer as I'm doing it
uh,
exactly what it's about and who it's for.
So I feel like your recognition magic saw some themes, and then you're like, "Ooh, this could make sense in a
Yeah.
movie."
Yeah.
And then I love just doing it, and I'm imagining there could be a lot of head conversation about where to start, and you
Yeah. But
just start writing.
I think I learned from doing my book, it's better to have it. People always say get your shitty first draft. By the way, I didn't ask if I could swear on this. I've just been swearing. Yes. I don't know.
All
We
good.
could edit that out. Anyway, crappy first draft.
Did we just meet?
I what?
I'm like, did we just meet?
I know. Sorry. Anyway, so so that's it. I'm like, it'd be better to have something to work with so that if I can go get help from people who know how to write movies, wouldn't it be better to have the meat to work with and just talk about theory? So that's how I embraced it. And I'm almost done with the screenplay,
Wow.
which was cool because it took me like 7 years to write my book. And I just wrote a movie practically in 4 months. So, and at least it gives me something to work with now that I can get feedback. And who knows where it will end up, but I'm
Mm.
enjoying the journey, which is also newer for me the last 2 years, is
Yeah.
enjoying the process and the journey rather than hustling so hard to be like, what's the end prize? How does this make money? Who is this going to impact?
Well, that's the rabbit hole I'd like to go down for a minute or two, because
Okay.
when you said, where's the strategy in this? And, I know your soul seed strategy,
Mm-hmm.
and I know strategy is one of your gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I remember in our, back when we were working together, thinking, yeah, but that's not your top gift. Like I remember like, yeah, you can do strategy, but it's not your top. And then because you have just more, right? And then I would say, Amber, over the last, 5 years or whatever, for me, I've had to pry my own strategy out of my hand, right? Like I've been helping other people let go of like having to be attached to it, but I realized, whoa, what really could be possible if I just trust the next step
Mm.
and trust the next step. And, my brain is so good at figuring shit out. And you've heard me say
Yeah.
that, but like I used to always feel like if I just had a flip chart, empty flip chart in a weekend, I could like solve everything in the world.
Mm.
But like it's so not true. All we know is the
Yeah.
next thing. And so when you say, where's the strategy in this? And I have a client right now who is uh an artist, like was recognized for her art when she was younger, and is really holding on to, I can't do that until all this. And it's like the art opens up the business strategy and vice versa. So
Yeah.
yeah, anything you want to say about that as soul seed strategy,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
how you're seeing that show up with clients? Because I think people are getting it more and more.
Yes. I have a whole lot of thoughts at once. I have a few things to say. So, one of the things I'm good at is recognizing that many of us do still need to make the money. So I've allowed myself to like keep the few things that are making money and that are working well, let those be what they are. And I've intentionally, when I shifted a lot a few years ago and I let a lot go, was because I made the commitment and choice to give myself freedom of creation space. And I will say it was not easy, but it was the right choice for me, where I really had to sit in what are my top values? How do I want to live my life? What really brings me the most joy? And a lot of that was in our work together, was like, I really love creation space. And I'm a lot better at what I do when I have that. But with that, that means committing to this space for things like working on this movie that I don't know how it will ever pay off. But I, at the same time, like I do know though that it actually does make me better in all the things, because when I show up and do my coaching and consulting and my speaking, it's like my tank is just so much more full because
Yes.
I had this space to be doing something different. To kind of wrap up what I was trying to say there is I do feel it's important. And at least in my case, like I do need to earn some of the money that I need to earn. Like there's money not coming from somewhere else.
Sure.
But what I've done is figured out a way that I don't have to like work all the hours constantly on the paying stuff. Like I figured out What are my top gifts that I can get paid the best for? I've learned how to charge appropriately for so that it gives me some space for creation.
Mhm.
And it's what feels alive. It's what feels joy. And so the strategy to that was and I teach people and I do it for myself. The strategy is really defining, well, what are the top things that you really want to define your life by? And how do we build your life to fit that? And this was a part of that for me, is being a creator and a musician and an artist and a writer and seeing where it takes me and not like just trusting a bit of that more rather than define knowing, well, when I get the movie done, I'm going to sell it for this much and then da da da. That's potential that could happen, but also a
Right,
potential for not, but I still feel it's worth doing.
right. What advice would you have for someone who's really resonating with this? You said, I've figured out how to make this creative space. Like, what tips would you give someone?
Mm. You do have to, it helps if you do know your zone of genius and the skills that you have that can bring the money,
Mhm.
that and the things that can be worth the most. Because if you can charge more for less hours, it gives you more freedom to do other things.
Really good. And you help people with that.
Yeah.
Amber, talk about Unleashed and the workbook and the audiobook and how people can
Ooh,
take
thank
that
you.
step with you.
Yeah. Yep. So my book, there's the print book. It's back here.
It's behind you,
There we
yes.
go. But also I recently released my audiobook and it was such a fun journey of just like doing it myself or narrating it myself. I put some clips of my band's music in there. So it's on Audible and
Ooh.
Apple Books and Amazon. But I also have created a complimentary workbook. It's about 7 pages. It's pretty robust. And it's a lot of the things that I guide clients through on private retreats. And so it's the Uncover Your Dreams and Unleash Your Impact workbook, where if people are wanting to get access to some of this, but maybe aren't ready for
Mm,
looking at coaching, you can make this your own retreat from home journey. But pairing it with the book is super powerful too.
I love that. Okay, so we're going to put those links below this. What would you want to leave people with about, what I call, their magic, but I'm going to look at your exact words because I feel like it was so good. That, you knew before you started that you were really helping people to follow their dreams, to follow
Mm,
their soul's calling, which is that freedom of doing what comes alive. What would you want to
yeah.
leave people with about that?
What do I want? So much pressure.
Mhm. I'm
I think
downloading the workbook while you do that.
amazing. There's so much freedom when we give ourselves permission to lean into what feels alive, what you feel drawn toward. Even if you can't logically explain it, there is a freedom that you can't put a price on that comes. And that's what I call living unleashed, is when you are being who you came here to be because it's what you feel you're meant to do and you can't put a price on that.
Yeah, that really lands. I think people are taking that from this conversation and all of the little pieces and parts. And the, you had said, I've come to a place where I just, if I think I mostly know, I'm just going to do it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
the freedom of that versus over analyzing, that's what I hear is like the feeling of trusting yourself is so good.
Yes. Thank you for saying yes. And it took a few years of practice but it's like it's minimized. It's not like it doesn't still come up. But I used to do this thing of talking myself in circles through a decision. And now I'm able to see it for what it is. And if I need to talk through it, it's more like I'm observing myself saying, I need to talk through it because it's my process, but not because I'm confused. I still know what I'm going to do.
Yes. I love that so much, Amber. I love you. Thank
Thank
you so
you
much
so
for
much.
saying yes to this.
Thank
And I'm
you.
excited for all the people who are going to become unleashed.
Woohoo. Thank you.
Have an amazing day, everyone, and we'll see you in the next episode.